It's June 21st, 2022. I'm watching See the BS this morning. There's a commercial that came on this morning. It's about depression. Now, what's really interesting about this is in a different segment of the sequence of this time frame for the pictures hanging on the wall that they call state media, there is a message from Vladimir Putin's press secretary, or at least that's, and again, I don't know if that's an insult, those words, because he seemed more important than that, than the one that we have now at the podium, but he said it's Fortune's Soldiers of Fortune, about some two people claiming to be Americans. I can see one looks North American. I don't know what the other one looks like. Again, that's part of the problem in this America, is the language and then the inner territory and then what lies just outside the borders of North America. So, and then how the world perceives it. And then there's another section with this Stephen Colbert, who did this puppetry with a Rottweiler and a cigar. And they said they're citing some other laws, like, or theoretical laws of some industry that I've never even heard of. And then there's this commercial that comes on, and I'm watching the messenger system of who is saying what message in this depression. Because quite frankly, the position that I've been in, it's Lewis. If I go generational wealth progression, it's a regression. So it's like my grandfather was not, my grandfather from the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, and his wife were not extraordinarily wealthy. And then my father, it looks as though somebody cared enough to take a slight care and put whatever. But then again, that might be a misread, but whatever. And then I'm living in what's called a depression, like a depression era. But I'm living in a depression era while there's an exorbitant amount of wealth around me, and I see it on the TV everywhere being mentioned. So now while this black and brown population is excelling and soaring through the roof here in North America, and I have no idea how they imported themselves in with money and wealth and this extravagant education system and an engineering department and all these inventions and access to industry. I mean, I'm not quite sure how they got themselves that integrated into this global system or local system that has global ties. But in the same time, I've been held in a very different captive position, in a regression into depression in monetary ability and ability to move, self-sustain, and find. I mean, like, I wanted to serve next to somebody who actually loved and cared for me. That has not happened. I've not had a man who has loved or cared for me, Lewis. It looked like when I was little he did, but it hasn't, as far as producing the correct suitor and marriage. Didn't happen. But then again, America and the U.S. has part to do with that as well. So that's a problem. And so now I'm watching this television piece about this depression, and I'm watching who is narrating the message to the white guy to make him feel bad, or the kind of white guy. I mean, he looks a little yellow, but it could be a liver enzyme problem, which is, at this point, I saw the other day also, there's this white woman on who was in the hospital. I didn't make mention of it because she's got tubes all on her, and she's like barely holding on. And then they were saying that she actually had holes in her lungs at the beginning of COVID, and they didn't explain why. They didn't explain what was the cause of the holes, just that they were able to use these devices that they use for emphysema to slip into her lungs and try to plug up the holes again, but they don't say why the holes occurred. And of course, while I've been moved back to, I've had, yesterday there was a human that actually came to visit, go figure, and he mentioned something about the Dyson sphere and that I should look that up. And when I did, the pictorial representation of the one sphere and the Dyson sphere around it, and then the possibility of what I've already documented with the electricity staying up within the Dyson sphere and not being grounded or not interacting, and some of the other anatomical, kinesthetic, and like proprioception anomalies and phenomenon that I've picked up on. Like, that's the level of I need to serve next to somebody who knows that, so I can report whatever my finds are to get help, because it is affecting the normal population or the regular population. What I don't understand is why that level of human has been withheld from my ability to serve side by side. But this is what they choose to display in the powerful, and some conversation of abuse of power. And then in some conversation, absolute power has to come up.
Depression can be a really tough thing to go through. Fortunately, people always have a lot of ideas how to help you through.
You just gotta snap out of it.
That was one messenger system. Not helpful.
You have so much to be happy for. Fake it till it feels normal.
Cheer up.
It's all in your head.
That was what the Dark Lord said when he was downstairs. No, there's a man named Lord, and I thought you weren't supposed to take the Lord's name in vain. Where are the Christians on this? Why are they naming themselves and their children Lord? Lord of what? Ruler of the realm is asking.
It's because you're a Leo.
Because you're a Leo. Ouch. What does Chris and Tom have to say about that? I mean, they're at a much more elite class, but from the dirt on the bottom of the American and the U.S. shoe, I can tell you right now, it's been a really painful existence.
Think about all the people that have it worse than you.
It's not helpful. Now, I'm going to go to a segment which I've seen throughout the years, where they push this college thing, this college farce, in this area. They advertise it. They spend a lot of money on it. They put the next gens into $1.76 trillion worth of debt with federal aid, no less. So I guess they bought the next generation. And they think like they're just gonna have all this debt wiped away. I'm like, I'm still in a depression, and I was built and delivered in 1978. So unless like the God Squad comes and like takes you out of like the really deep hole of nothingness, it ain't gonna happen. I mean, like, there's no hope. I haven't seen it. So they're sitting at this table and they're propagating this college farce in some continuous fashion and motion that this is like the thing to do. And then they're sitting there and they're like, no, you have to put some away from savings and some away from retirement. And this is the fraud. Because when I got my first job after I was raped and mutilated by someone in my sleep in the local area, woke up, I'm making $28,000 a year in New York. And the way that car insurance, health insurance, and just food, not even clothing to make myself try to look nice, not even cosmetics with treatments and therapeutics and a gym membership, none of that stuff, none of the extras, just $28,000 a year. One person, one baby on the way, and one guy that tried to murder me, that sometimes has a job, sometimes doesn't. Now, where is this at the table with Gail and all the other useless faces that they got on this TV station? Now, where exactly, because they're all fraud. It doesn't exist in the real world. I've tried it and failed at it continuously, trying to stay in good spirits, trying to figure out a way just to make ends meet. But the reality of the situation is they only gave me $28,000 to start, and I had to try to make my ends meet in New York with money mechanics that were working poor and putting me further into debt every month. So why are they still 4 decades in the making, 20 if we're going to cut it short with when my son arrived into this shit show, 20 years in the making, they're still sitting at the table pushing the same lie and nobody's shutting them down. Why is that? Now they flash images like independence on the green linen, which is very family specific and territorial for this area, being inside this United States and being North America. So while I've been held captive or captivated in this system that looks like it's out of control. I mean, they're so fraudulently speaking of a system that doesn't work. I went to the school system provided by the system that is telling me you go through the school, you exit and graduate the school system, you then get a job, and you'll have money to put away for retirement and savings and be able to afford yourself. That's what they're intimating. Repeatedly throughout the last 20 years, I have sought out work. I've achieved some work, one being Merrill Lynch before Bank of America, and the second being Chase. So 28,000, then 38,000 over 20 years. There was no money, and 4 kids no less. There was no money to be able to save, not now, not ever, not to go on vacation, not to enjoy oneself, not even to be able to afford a gym membership. Somebody gave that to me for free, thank God. But yet they're on the television lying to the entire public that if they go through the school system that there's some future for them. There was no future for me. How on earth can they propagate and mislead the public into thinking that there's a future for them, even if they follow the social norms?
In today's Money Watch, we have financial advice for recent college graduates and their families, especially if they had to borrow for school. Right now, Americans owe more than $1.7 trillion in federal loan debt. The average federal student loan debt balance is more than $37,000. CBS News business analyst Jill Schlesinger is here to help new grads tackle that debt and their overall finances. Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm great.
All right, so these federal student loan payments are suspended through August 31st. How can recent graduates prepare for those upcoming payments?
I got to start by please warning folks that, you saw that number that the average is about 37 or 40,000 of outstanding student loan. I'm hearing from a lot of students who are like, well, it's probably just going to all get erased, right? So don't count on that.
Fingers crossed, right?
Exactly. I think that there is a possibility that 10,000 does get erased, and it may be weighted based on it.
How? How is $10,000 erased? Who's erasing it?
How much money you earn, but don't count on everything being gone. And so when you think about what is my average student loan debt, what is the payment that I need to make, you need to go into the system, figure out what you owe, and make a list,
And also, that eyeball that CBS uses, behind Nate, it's blue and black. Behind this Jill chick, it's white with some kind of yellow lettering.
Be sure to understand what is the interest rate that it will be charged for you as of September 1st.
Right there.
And sure, if you're lucky enough, great. Some of it is gone, but beyond that, you're going to
Prepare as if you're paying off the whole thing.
Absolutely. And before we had COVID, the most common payment that people had was say $200 or $300 a month. You hear these terrible stories, it's thousands of dollars. There are cases like that, but most common, we're trying to get people to pay off that debt within 10 years of graduation. And I think a lot of these kids really can do that.
So how do you start, Jill, to even have a responsible financial life? If you're starting a new career, hopefully you've got a job, and you have student debt, how do you even begin to...
A career or a job? Well, here's the thing. The way that the school was run, being kindergarten, elementary, junior high, and high school, there was no mention of college. There was a person who came into the All the Right Stuff restaurant thing I was working at that had a salad bar, pizza, and frozen yogurt. And she asked me about it. I was like, can you spell that? Because again, brand new word for me, and I didn't know what it looked like in a written form because there was no talk of college in New York. So now there's no talk of college. No marriage showed up and stayed and helped me out so this way I could work and serve side by side. And then there's this, well, you have to do something with your time. So I go out for work and job, but the mechanics of money don't work because you cannot sustain yourself. And there was nothing provided by the state. And there was no information. While at the same time, they were preparing the school and students, unbeknownst to me, to go into this college system and have some other kind of opportunity. So now, why was I specifically targeted and withheld from normal human progression?
To make the best use of your money.
I think this is a great moment for people to just sort of take a deep breath and say, hey, I have a job, because we know that these students are actually graduating into a very hot labor market, so many of them will have jobs. And so now you know what's coming in from that.
Now, are these white North Americans, or are these just the refugees that have encroached on our freedoms, liberties, and ability to even breathe at this point? I'm just curious. Because again, I've got Dyson sphere level science work I need to speak to somebody about, and nobody exists, as far as I can see.
That job, how much money you're going to make. The problem is we don't like concentrating on what's going out. So what we really want to focus on is, what are you spending money on? And that may mean that if you're not living with your folks anymore, maybe you're paying rent for the first time in your life. Maybe you have to pay for your food. Maybe you have to actually figure out who's buying that first round of drinks for you, not you buying for them.
And you say keep track of all
And
that
you've
stuff.
got to keep track of it. Do you know that about 2/3 of Americans...
does that, Jill?
1/3 of Americans. Thank you for saying that. I'm like, 1/3. I mean, listen, there are people like me who love the spreadsheet. There are tons of apps out there. Actually, millennials are quite good at keeping track. They've been very good to do that. So you want to keep track of that money. What are you trying to figure out? How much money can you free up every single month to be able to put money down on your debt? Again, highest interest debt comes first, because we know that kids are graduating with student loan debt, but there may be credit card debt, there may be an auto loan. You've got to price that out, and you say, let me attack highest interest debt first. That's most important. If you are lucky enough not to have any debt, guess what? You can start saving, and that's a beautiful thing.
All right. Yeah. Miracle upon miracle, you got all your debt covered. Right?
Miracle upon miracle,
Right?
yeah.
How much savings is the goal? What should you shoot for?
You know, when people are coming out of school, once you get that debt cleared up, I think that there's two forms of saving. Gail, this is dedicated to you. Emergency reserve fund, which I know everyone gets on me for saying 6 to 12 months of your living expenses.
These all, in a theoretical, on paper, make so much sense. I mean, duh. But in actuality, when you are out there and you look at these paychecks, I mean, after taxes, if you're making $1,500 a week, after taxes, if you're taking home like $900, maybe $1,000, there is no room. I mean, you have to beg, you have to borrow money from your parents just in order to complete the week. Because after taxes that you've paid, there was no living expenses for the last 20 years.
It used to be 3 months.
Yeah, but I like 6 to 12 because life is uncertain. So you really want to try to save as much as you can in that emergency reserve fund. But then there's long-term saving, and that might be a retirement account. So we're looking...
These are fraudulent conversations because there's no guarantee. Already went through the system already failed. But yet here I am at 40, still trying to figure out how to re-enter the system at a level that is sustainable, and there's still no entry point that I can see. And on top of it, they're now lying to my children.
For 10 or 15% in between the two. If you are looking at, I've got debt, I have to save into my emergency reserve fund, and I want to save for retirement. Think of it this way. Your debt and your emergency reserve fund are your primary goals. But that retirement account, if you've got a match from your employer, don't give away that money. Try to put 6% there, and you're whittling it away.
They use this umbrella term, employer. Who are these employers that pay this money? Why are these employers not anywhere in access to my person? Why do I not know their names, where to go, what to look for, what to ask for? I mean, who takes the responsibility on wasting my first 13 years of educational ability and capability, holding me in a room, and then ruining the rest of my adulthood? Like, where does that burden of actuality fall upon? I'm just curious.
The beautiful thing about graduating right now is you've got time on your side. Let's form the good habits early, and parents and grandparents help foster that environment.
I'm glad you brought that up. You know, in 2003, I was a rookie in the NFL, and I was being told I need to focus on retirement. I was just trying to make the team. But they were right, though. And how important is it for young people, these recent grads, to start thinking about retirement right now?
I bet if I did a poll of everybody on this set, the first thing they would say is the thing I should have done is put as much money as possible in my retirement plan as early as possible.
Yeah.
So let me be clear about one thing. We have high inflation right now, right? What is on sale relative to where we were 6 months ago? Stocks and bonds. Right now, you can buy stocks at a 20% discount of where they were 6 months ago. Guess what? If you're starting out in your retirement plan right now, you've got time on your side, you've had a market that's in a bear market, it is time to get busy.
Slide a little bit in
Get
there.
in the habit a little bit more every single year.
After Joel's retirement plan, you're going to have $5 extra for the week.
Yeah, that's right. Woo-hoo. Get that
Have fun.
Have fun. Don't go crazy.
Do you know how insulting this conversation is? I mean, like, in its entirety. Then they have this thing about this woman who found this Bavarian bust of something. It was a stolen piece of artwork from whatever, that she found it in a thrift store in New York or in the United States or in America. And then she returned it too. It's so nice that they found some piece of artwork and then they returned it to the owner for which, or to some unit that knows of this particular art piece. I do remember being 16, having somebody book an appointment with me for babysitting, which I used to babysit again, the children in the neighborhood, just to keep myself busy and out of trouble. But there was no kids. It was a really strange one-time encounter. Took me for a ride in his car, and then at the end showed me a card with some weird symbols on it I had never seen, and said that there was a really lovesick teenager somewhere else who was searching for me. And I said, well, can I have a phone number? He's like, no, he said, you can consider me an art dealer. And I'm like, an art dealer? I was like, why an art dealer? And he said, because you have a painting. You're the girl with the pearl earring. And I'm like, so he showed me a picture of it because I had never even heard of it at that point. But like, these things happened in my life frame. I know people know it exists. I know the people involved know who they are. What I don't understand is why I never got to lovesick teenager who knew about the girl with the pearl earring that could have kept me safe rather than leaving me in this really disgusting story frame. Here's them telling that story.
Back.
All right, bring us in.
Okay.
Take us to a news story here about how you can find just about anything in a thrift store, from books to clothes, one-of-a-kind furniture. Well, a Texas woman was shocked to learn that a statue she bought in 2018 has a 2,000-year-old story behind it. Omar Villafranca decided to wrap his head around this marble mystery.
Shopping at this Goodwill boutique in Austin, Texas is like sifting for gold.
It's like luck, I feel like. You have to look.
Between the gently used dresses and the kitchenware,
I am looking for whatever catches my eye and whatever works on any given day.
This is what being American, North American, looks like, to me, anyway, in this time frame.
there are deeply discounted secondhand treasures to be found.
I found older the lithographs and silver dishes.
When antiques dealer Laura Young goes thrifting, she keeps her head on a swivel.
I'm looking for anything, first of all, that I love and anything that I think you will love for your home.
Laura Young was roaming around these aisles looking for household treasures when she saw something sitting on a lower shelf that caught her eye. You had a hunch that it was something.
Oh, yes.
Young was mesmerized. The details in the hair, the brooding look on the man's face.
There's a lifelikeness to the face.
But was this a masterwork of art or some relic of a college toga party? Young had to find out.
You try to pick it up, it weighs a lot. Definitely solid marble. The price is right, $34.99.
When you flip over and you see that it's $34.99,
Yeah, no questions. Immediately find a guy to pick it up.
sold.
Yes. So I pay for it as
That's the inverse of the 43, and my first son was born in 99.
quickly as humanly possible, and had the same guy carry it out to the car for me. And I strapped him into the front seat of the car with a seatbelt.
With the bust belted into her car, she went home and started reaching out to experts. She sent pictures to academics and auction houses, trying to find out more about the stranger now sitting in her living room.
A couple of days later, I hear from Sotheby's auction house.
My son, by the way, does not look anything like that.
And one of their specialists had actually identified the head as previously being part of the German-owned or Bavarian-owned state antiquities collection. It's like a...
Now, Louis and his family, or his mother, had these Bavarian dinnerware they call them dishes, I suppose, that Linda still has, which I've cataloged earlier, with with Bavarian cotton.
It's like a movie or something. The backstory of this head is nuts.
Experts say the $35 Roman bust sitting in her home was a priceless piece of stolen art. The statue dates back to the late 1st century BC to the early 1st century AD and was part of the collection of King Ludwig I of Bavaria in Aschaffenburg, Germany. This picture was used to identify the bust and shows the museum where the statue once stood. Lindley McAlpine is a Roman art and provenance specialist at the San Antonio Museum of Art. You hear stories sometimes of people finding an old copy of the Constitution behind another piece of art.
Mm-hmm.
Do they ever find ancient Roman busts at a Goodwill?
I've never heard of any antiquities, any ancient Roman, Greek, Egyptian, anything like that coming from a thrift store. Certainly not something as huge and obviously old as this.
But how the sculpture ended up in Texas remains a mystery. Experts believe an American soldier might have smuggled the bust back to the States after the King's Villa in Germany was bombed by Allied forces during World War II.
Now, one of the Americans yesterday came, or I don't know if he's an American, but he's U.S., I guess. He's a service person. I don't know if it's for America or U.S. or somewhere else. Who the hell knows? Can't tell. Because they were not in uniform, but he said he was in the service. So they came. He had historical teachings. He was 81 years old. He said something, because I had never really heard of, I know the puzzle piece that looks like Texas. I know George Bush was from Texas. No, nothing other than that, just a name and a puzzle piece with a pattern of letters. So he said, did you ever hear of the Alamo? I'm like, again, word sounds familiar. I was like, what's the important details with that? He said, it's Alamo, Maximilian, and Houston was the first mayor. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because for me, it's like NASA with the rockets. It's like, Houston, we have a problem. Like, that's the only time I've ever thought of Houston. So anyway, so that's what one of the conversations were when he came yesterday.
It couldn't be sold legitimately because it was known to have been stolen. And there are all sorts of war-related laws, like the Geneva Convention.
Another thing, Geneva Convention. That's all I ever get. And yesterday he didn't mention the Geneva Convention. How do you learn about this Geneva Convention? How do you learn about what laws were written, what safety procedures, what not to violate, what qualifies, how they speak? How does one learn this and then to protect oneself if others know, but they're keeping it from you? So I know this Geneva Convention existed, not sure when or why, because the Americans haven't taught that or haven't passed or enlightened or even enriched my life with teaching me about it. But I know there's others that know.
Okay.
So war looting is a crime, is a war crime. And when you find something like this, you're not going to be able to sell it on the legitimate art market.
It never occurred to me that he could have arrived here by nefarious means. That being said, this is my first, piece of looted art that I've purchased.
Young can't talk details or compensation, but she is returning the bust back to the German government. But not before the centuries-old sculpture remains on display at the San Antonio Museum of Art for a few more months.
I had to drive down and see him in the museum. That's my guy. I got choked up just seeing other people see him and read the story. He was hidden in our house for almost 4 years, and just seeing other people appreciate him was amazing.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and for Young, this bust was head and shoulders the finest piece of art she's ever returned. For CBS Mornings, I'm Omar Villafranca in San Antonio.
First of all, what a masterful piece of art. The head looked particularly sad. It like slumped over in the front seat of her car with the seatbelt on and the Goodwill sticker on it.
She knew she had something, just the fact that she strapped it in. The detail on the hair is interesting, but don't we want to know how much? You can't discuss details and compensation.
I want to know what you
Do
got.
you think that means because it's so much or because it's not a lot?
I think that means because it's so much.
Because it's so much,
Yeah.
even though it was stolen?
Why would you give it back? Why would you reach out to...
Well, because you love art and you want it to be back in the country. A lot of people think, this
And it
art
was
should be in the
stolen.
country where, it was stolen.
And you want to do the right thing.
First of all,
Do you love art that much that you would give it back to her?
I'm not her, okay? She was on a hunt for things.
It's not about me. All right, well, listen, she won't talk finances.
Yeah.
But we will. Coming up.
It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza. It's Earth, Solar System, Milky Way, Universe, Galaxy is broken. And it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.